the Crimson Wolf of the Seas. Captain Caelan Blackwood was a name spoken in hushed, terrified whispers from the Ivory Coast to the Caribbean. His ruthlessness was a legend, his flag a promise of fire and death. But when his crew sacked the port town of Oakhaven, they faced something no cannonball could destroy, the unflinching courage of a single human boy. When the boy Elias offered his own life to save his family, the fearsome captain did the unthinkable. He didn't raise his sword, he lowered it. The decision he made in that moment shattered his reputation for cruelty and sent a tremor of confusion and rage through his bloodthirsty crew, igniting a story of savage secrets, a forbidden bond, and a love that would either tame the beast or drown them all in a sea of blood. The sky wept a cold, merciless rain over the burning remains of Oakhaven. The scent of saltwater ash and fear mingled into a suffocating perfume that clung to the air. At the center of the chaos, standing on the splintered planks of the governor's portico, was Captain Caelan Blackwood. He was a man carved from the storm itself, tall and broad-shouldered, with a greatcoat soaked black by the rain, and a face that looked as if it had been hewn from granite. Long dark hair, laced with threads of silver, was plastered to his brow, and his eyes, the color of a winter storm, missed nothing. His crew, the ruthless cutthroats who sailed aboard the Lycan's Vengeance, were a pack of jackals let loose. They hauled loot, herded frightened townsfolk, and laughed with the cruel glee of men who had forgotten what mercy felt like. Caelan watched them with a detached indifference. This was business, survival. He was the apex predator, and the world was his hunting ground. His first mate, a grizzled man named Silas with a map of scars for a face, dragged the town's mayor forward. He refuses to give up the location of the customs house vault captain. Caelan's gaze fell upon the trembling mayor, a portly man whose finery was now stained with mud and terror. "Is a chest of gold worth your life?" Mayor Caelan's voice was a low rumble like distant thunder. It held no heat, only the chilling promise of violence. The mayor sputtered, "We are a humble town, we have nothing more to give." Caelan sighed a sound of profound boredom. He drew the heavy flintlock pistol from his belt, its silver inlays gleaming dully in the gloom. The click of the hammer being cocked was louder than any scream. I find that hard to believe. He leveled the pistol at the mayor's head. The man squeezed his eyes shut, whimpering. The crew gathered eager for the familiar spectacle of their captain's cold justice. "Stop!" The voice was not loud, but it cut through the din with the sharp clarity of breaking glass. Caelan's head turned slowly, his stormy eyes narrowing. Pushing through the crowd of captured townsfolk was a boy. He couldn't have been more than 19, slim and wiry, with a shock of auburn hair that clung to his pale forehead. He was soaked to the bone, his simple linen shirt and trousers offering little protection from the elements. But it was his eyes that held Caelan captive. They were a startling shade of green, and they burned with a defiant fire that had no place in a scene of such abject surrender. "Step back, boy," Silas growled, moving to intercept him. Caelan raised a single commanding hand. Silas froze. The boy Elias Vance stepped forward until he was only a few feet from the most feared pirate on the seven seas. He didn't look at the pistol or the bloodthirsty crew or the burning buildings. He looked only at Caelan. "Let him go," Elias said, his voice shaking only slightly. "He knows nothing. The gold was moved to a military vessel 2 days ago. You've taken everything else. Your plunder is won." Caelan tilted his head, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Amusement. Annoyance. "And who are you to tell me when my work is done? I am no one," Elias admitted, lifting his chin. "Just the son of a chandler. But I am telling you the truth. Killing him will gain you nothing but a wasted shot." A few crewmen chuckled. The audacity was almost comical. one of them a hulking brute named Garrick, who had once served under the infamous Charles Vane, spat on the ground. "The whelp's got a death wish, Captain. Let me grant it for him." Kalen ignored Garrick. His focus remained locked on Elias. He saw the boy's hands were clenched into fists at his sides, knuckles white. He saw the rapid beat of a pulse in his throat. This wasn't arrogance. It was raw, unadulterated bravery, forged in the fires of desperation. The boy was terrified, yet he stood his ground. In a world of cowards and brutes, it was as rare and stunning as a diamond in a coal heap. "You value this man's life so much?" Kalen asked, his voice softer now, a dangerous purr. "I value any innocent life," Elias countered, his green eyes flashing. "Something you and your men clearly know nothing about." The crew's murmurs turned to angry growls. To be lectured by a slip of a boy was an insult beyond measure. Silas's hand went to the hilt of his cutlass, but Kalen was not angry. He was intrigued. He felt a strange primal pull toward the boy, a confusing resonance deep within his chest that he hadn't felt in decades. It was a flicker of warmth in the frozen landscape of his soul. For a man who dealt in fear, this boy's complete lack of it, or rather his mastery over it, was a profound anomaly. He slowly lowered the pistol. "You have a spine, boy. I'll give you that." He holstered the weapon and took a step closer, looming over Elias. The boy didn't flinch, didn't break eye contact. "So you believe in sacrifice? Let's test that belief. I'll spare the mayor. I'll spare your entire, pathetic, waterlogged town." A collective gasp went through the crowd. Silas stared at his captain in disbelief. "What's the price?" Elias asked, his voice tight. Kalen's lips curved into a semblance of a smile, though it held no warmth. You will take the mayor's place." "Not in death," he added, seeing the boy's jaw tighten. "In servitude. You will come with us. Serve on my ship. Your life in exchange for all of theirs." The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the hiss of the rain and the crackle of distant flames. Elias's gaze darted to his family, huddled together, his mother's face a mask of horror. He looked at the trembling mayor, then back to the pirate captain, whose silver-grey eyes seemed to see straight through him. To sail with these monsters was a fate perhaps worse than death, a life of brutality, deprivation, and certain violence. But for his town, for his family, it wasn't a choice at all. "I accept, Elias," said his voice, clear and firm. The crew of the Lycan's Vengeance stared at their captain as if he'd grown a second head. They had come for gold, for rum, for a bloody good time. They were leaving with a scrawny, defiant cabin boy. Garrick looked ready to mutiny on the spot, his face a thunderous mask of confusion and rage. Silas Kalen commanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Leave them. Take the boy and the plunder we already have. We set sail with the tide." Silas, though bewildered, knew better than to question a direct order. He grabbed Elias's arm roughly. "You heard him. Move!" As Elias was dragged toward the longboats, he cast one last look over his shoulder. He saw his mother collapse into his father's arms, weeping. He saw the faces of his neighbors, a mixture of relief, pity, and shame. And he saw Captain Kalen Blackwood, watching him, his expression as unreadable and vast as the stormy sea they were about to sail upon. The ruthless pirate was stunned by the human boy's bravery, and what he did next had not just shaken his crew, it had utterly shattered their understanding of the man they followed. The Crimson Wolf had shown mercy. And on a ship built on fear, mercy was a dangerous currency. The world shrank to the creaking timbers, the stink of bilge water, and the constant oppressive presence of the sea. The Lycan's Vengeance was a beast of a ship. its black sails seeming to drink the sunlight, its mast a skeletal finger pointing at a bruised sky. For Elias, it was a floating hell. The crew treated him with a mixture of contempt and suspicion. He was the captain's strange prize, a symbol of a weakness they couldn't comprehend. The hulking Garrick made his life particularly miserable. He was tasked with the filthiest jobs, swabbing decks, slick with fish guts, and worse, emptying chamber pots and tending to the reeking bilges. Garrick would, accidentally, trip him, sending a bucket of foul water splashing over him, or knock his meagre ration of hardtack into the scuppers. Look at the captain's little pet. Garrick would sneer, his cronies laughing behind him. Think your pretty words will save you out here, boy. Elias learned quickly to keep his head down, to work without complaint, and to make himself as small as possible. He was exhausted, sore, and perpetually hungry, but he refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing him break. He held on to the memory of his family's safety, like a talisman, against the encroaching despair. He saw Captain Kalen only fleetingly. The captain remained a distant, intimidating figure, often pacing the quarterdeck alone or secluded in his vast cabin at the stern. Yet Elias felt his eyes on him, more than once, a heavy, assessing gaze that sent a shiver down his spine. It wasn't a leer or a threat. It was something else entirely, something searching and intense that Elias couldn't decipher. A week into the voyage, after a particularly grueling day of mending sails in a biting wind, Silas approached him. The first mate's expression was as grim as ever. "Captain wants to see you." Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through Elias's exhaustion. He followed Silas to the stern, to the ornate wooden door of the captain's cabin. Silas opened it and shoved him inside, closing it firmly behind him. The cabin was another world. Compared to the cramped, foul-smelling crew quarters, it was a palace. It spanned the entire width of the stern with leaded glass windows, offering a panoramic view of the ship's churning wake. A massive oak desk was bolted to the floor, covered in nautical charts, a gleaming astrolabe, and books bound in dark leather. A fire crackled in a small iron stove, casting a warm, flickering light on the rich tapestries that lined the walls. And standing by the windows, staring out at the twilight sea, was Kalen Blackwood. He had shed his heavy greatcoat, and in the soft light, his simple white shirt and dark breeches did little to hide the raw power of his form. "You sent for me?" Captain Elias's voice was hoarse. Kalen turned. His storm-grey eyes seemed to absorb the firelight, glowing with an inner intensity. "Tell me your name." "Elias Vance." Elias Kalen repeated the name, a low rumble in his chest. He gestured to a small stool near the stove. "Sit." Warily, Elias obeyed. Kalen remained standing, a predator circling its curiosity. "Why did you do it?" Kalen asked, his voice devoid of its usual commanding tone. It was a genuine question. In Oakhaven. Why step forward? "You had no way of knowing. I wouldn't simply shoot you and the mayor both." Elias looked at his hands, calloused and dirty from a week of labor. "Because doing nothing was the same as helping you pull the trigger. If my life could buy theirs, it was a trade I was willing to make." Kalen was silent for a long moment, studying him. "You speak of life and trade like a merchant, not a hero." "My father is a merchant," Elias said quietly. "A chandler. He taught me that everything has a value. I just valued their lives more than my own comfort." A strange look passed over Kalen's face. It was a fleeting expression of something that looked almost like pain. Comfort. He scoffed softly. "There is no comfort in this world. Only survival." He walked to a tall cabinet and retrieved a decanter of dark liquid and 2 glasses. He poured a measure into each, the liquid the color of blood. He handed one to Elias. "What is it?" Elias asked, hesitant. "Portuguese wine." The finest. A spoil of a different raid, Kalen said. He took a sip from his own glass, his eyes never leaving Elias. My crew thinks I've gone soft. They see you and they see a chink in my armor. They think I spared you out of some misplaced sentiment. And did you? Elias asked, emboldened by the wine's warmth. Kalen's lips thinned. Sentiment is a luxury I cannot afford. I spared you because your bravery was unexpected. It was a variable I had not accounted for. And I am a man who likes to understand all the variables. He drained his glass and set it down with a heavy thud. Garrick gives you trouble. It wasn't a question. Elias's silence was answer enough. He is a brutish fool who thinks strength is measured in cruelty. Kalen continued, his voice hardening. He follows me out of fear. Most of them do. They believe me to be a monster, and I have cultivated that belief. It keeps them in line. It keeps me safe. Are you not, Elias dared to ask. A monster. Kalen looked at him, and for a second the firelight caught his eyes, and they seemed to flash with an unnatural silvery light. The air in the cabin grew thick, charged with a sudden primal energy. A low growl seemed to vibrate in Kalen's chest, a sound that was not entirely human. More than you could ever possibly imagine, Kalen whispered the words a chilling confession. He turned away abruptly, running a hand through his dark hair. The moment passed. The strange energy receded, leaving Elias with a racing heart and the unnerving feeling that he had just stood on the edge of a precipice. From now on you will serve me directly. Kalen ordered his back still to Elias. You will tend to this cabin. You will bring me my meals. You will stay out of Garrick's way. And if he touches you again, you will tell me. Why, Elias asked, genuinely confused. Why protect me? Kalen turned back his face, a mask of cold authority once more. The brief flicker of vulnerability was gone. Because you are mine. I traded a town for you, Elias Vance. I will not have my property damaged by the likes of Garrick. The words should have been insulting, branding him as a possession. But the way Kalen said them with that fierce, possessive glint in his storm-grey eyes sent a different kind of shiver through Elias. It wasn't entirely fear. It was something more complex, something dangerously alluring. He was a lamb in a wolf's den, but he was beginning to realize the wolf had no intention of letting the other predators near him, and he had no idea why. Life changed for Elias. His new duties kept him in the relative sanctuary of the captain's cabin. He cleaned, polished the wood until it shone, kept the fire fed, and organized the endless collection of charts. He took his meals there, simple fare delivered by a grumbling cook who now avoided his gaze. The move isolated him further from the crew, but it shielded him from their open hostility. Garrick and his cronies could only glare at him from afar. Their resentment, a palpable thing. The proximity to Kalen was a constant, unnerving dance. The captain was a creature of intense moods. Some days he was silent and brooding, staring at his charts for hours on end, the only sound the scratching of his quill. On other days, a restless energy would seize him. He would pace the length of the cabin like a caged animal, his powerful frame seeming too large for the space. It was during these times that Elias noticed the strangeness. Kalen's senses were preternaturally sharp. He would look up from a chart and turn toward the door seconds before Silas would knock. He once identified a distant ship by the specific pattern of its rigging, long before anyone on deck had called it out. As the ship sailed south into warmer waters, the moon began to wax, growing from a silver sliver to a pregnant orb in the night sky. With it, Kalen's restlessness intensified. His temper grew shorter, his voice sharper. Dark circles appeared under his eyes, as if he wasn't sleeping. Elias would often wake in his small cot tucked into an alcove in the cabin to the sound of Caelan's ragged breathing or a low groan from his master bed. One evening, 2 days before the full moon, Elias was lighting the lanterns as dusk fell. He fumbled with a flint and steel, and the flint slipped skittering across the floor. Before he could even bend to retrieve it, Caelan's hand shot out and snatched it from the air inches from the floor. The speed was inhuman. "Careful!" Caelan growled, his voice rougher than usual. He pressed the flint back into Elias's palm. His skin was burning hot, and his fingers were unnaturally strong. For a moment, his gaze met Elias's, and the boy saw it again, the flash of silver light in his eyes, more pronounced this time, like moonlight trapped in a storm cloud. Caelan snatched his hand back as if burned, and turned away, clenching his fists. "Get out," he said, his back to Elias. "Go. Sleep in the storage hold tonight," Captain Elias asked, confused. I said, "Get out." The command was a roar, a truly bestial sound that shook the very timbers of the ship. It was laced with a guttural undertone that made the hair on Elias's arms stand on end. Frightened, Elias scrambled from the cabin, not daring to look back. He found an empty corner in the forward hold among barrels of salted pork and coils of rope, and tried to sleep, the captain's terrifying roar echoing in his mind. The next day, Caelan did not emerge from his cabin at all. Silas took the helm, his expression tight and worried. He gave orders curtly, his eyes constantly straying toward the stern. The crew muttered amongst themselves. The captain's absence was unprecedented. Garrick saw it as a sign of weakness, a chance to stir dissent. "See," he said loudly to a group of pirates mending a net. "He hides away with his little pet. The crimson wolf has lost his teeth. He's gone soft." Elias, tasked with fetching fresh water, had to pass them. Garrick stuck out a leg, and Elias went sprawling, the bucket clattering across the deck. "Watch your step, cabin boy." Garrick sneered. Before Elias could even get up, Silas was there. The old first mate moved with surprising speed for a man his age. "Leave him be." "Garrick Silas," said, his voice low and dangerous. Or what old man Garrick challenged, rising to his full intimidating height. "The captain's not here to protect his plaything." "That's an order," Silas said, his hand resting on the hilt of his cutlass. "And my orders are the captain's orders." "Do you want to challenge that?" Garrick stared Silas down for a long moment before spitting on the deck and turning away. "This isn't over." Silas helped Elias to his feet. "Are you all right, lad?" "Yes." "Thank you," Elias said, dusting himself off. The first mate sighed, his gaze turning to the waxing moon, now nearly full, hanging ominously in the late afternoon sky. "You need to be careful, Elias, especially tonight. Stay away from the captain's cabin. Stay away from everyone if you can. Find a place to hide and don't come out until dawn." "What's happening tonight?" Elias asked, the same cold dread from the cabin returning. "Is the captain ill?" Silas looked at Elias, and in his weary eyes the boy saw a deep, abiding loyalty mixed with a profound sadness. "It's not an illness. It's a fever of the soul, an old curse. Just do as I say, for your own safety." He clapped a heavy hand on Elias's shoulder and walked away, leaving the boy with more questions than answers. A fever of the soul. A curse. The inhuman speed, the burning touch, the silver glint in his eyes, the bestial roar, the pieces began to click into place, forming a picture so monstrous, so impossible, that Elias's mind shied away from it. He remembered the old stories his grandmother used to tell tales to frighten children of men who became beasts under the light of the full moon. Werewolves. Lycans. The name of the ship suddenly felt chillingly literal. The Lycan's vengeance. As the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sea in shades of blood and orange. A long, mournful howl echoed from the stern of the ship. It was a sound of pure agony and animal fury, a sound that did not belong to any man. The crew fell silent, a collective fear washing over the deck. They had heard it before, on nights just like this. It was the source of their terror, the secret of their captain's ferocity. Elias, hidden again in the dark of the storage hold, knew Silas was right. He needed to hide. But a part of him, the same part that had stepped forward in Oakhaven, felt a strange pull of compassion for the man locked in that cabin, fighting a battle that Elias could only begin to imagine. The full moon rose a perfect luminous disk that bathed the sea in an ethereal silver light. It was beautiful and terrifying. On the deck of the Lycan's Vengeance, the air was thick with a tension that had nothing to do with the weather. Most of the crew stayed below decks, drinking rum and speaking in low voices, casting anxious glances at the ceiling. They knew the ritual. They knew to leave the captain to his torment. But Garrick was not most of the crew. For him, the captain's fever was an opportunity. He saw Kaelin's seclusion not as a sign of a dangerous affliction, but as a moment of profound weakness. With a few barrels of grog to fuel their courage, he gathered a handful of loyal cronies in the forecastle. He's locked himself away. Garrick slurred his face, flushed. The great Captain Blackwood, hiding in his cabin like a frightened dog, while that little whelp he favours gets the run of the ship. It ain't right. He's brought a curse on us, that boy has. The captain's lost his nerve. "What are you proposing?" Garrick asked a pirate named Finn, his eyes darting nervously toward the stern. "I'm proposing a change in leadership," Garrick declared, slamming his tankard down. "Silas is an old fool loyal to a coward. We take the ship, and the first thing we do is get rid of the source of the rot." He grinned a nasty, predatory expression. "I'm going to have a little chat with the cabin boy. Remind him what happens to pretty things on a pirate ship." Meanwhile, Elias couldn't stay hidden. The agonized sounds coming from the captain's cabin, the splintering of wood, guttural snarls, and deep, pain-filled moans, were too much to bear. Against Silas's warning, against every instinct for self-preservation, he found himself creeping along the deck toward the stern. He had to know. He had to. He didn't know what. Help. It was a foolish notion, but he couldn't shake it. He pressed his ear to the heavy oak door. The noises inside were escalating, a violent crash followed by a roar of such profound rage and agony it made his blood run cold. "I know you're out there, boy." Garrick's voice made Elias jump. He turned to see the hulking pirate and his 3 companions advancing on him, their silhouettes stark against the moonlight. They held belaying pins and lengths of thick rope. Nowhere to run, Garrick sneered, his eyes glinting with malice. "The captain's too busy with his demons to save you now." Elias backed away until his back was flat against the cabin door. "Leave me alone, Garrick." "Oh, I'll leave you alone," he chuckled, "after we've had our fun. Tie him up, boys. We'll show the whole crew what happens to the captain's favorites." As they lunged for him, a sound from inside the cabin dwarfed all others. It was the sound of a frame of solid oak being torn apart. The door behind Elias shuddered violently, the wood groaning and cracking. Boom! The door exploded outwards, blasted from its hinges as if hit by a cannonball. Elias was thrown to the deck, a hail of splinters flying over his head. From the darkened, ruined doorway, a creature of nightmare emerged. It was immense, far larger than any wolf Elias had ever seen or imagined. It had to stoop to clear the doorway, its shoulders as broad as a matton's. Its fur was the color of jet tipped with silver that shimmered like captured moonlight. Its eyes were not the grey of Kaelin Blackwood, but blazing pools of molten silver, burning with an ancient, untamable rage. A low, continuous growl rumbled in its massive chest, and its lips were pulled back to reveal teeth like a row of daggers. Garrick and his men froze, their drunken bravado evaporating into sheer primal terror. They had sailed with Kaelan for years. They had feared him, respected his ferocity, but they had never ever seen this. The stories, the whispers of a curse, were suddenly horrifically real. The giant wolf took a step forward, its claws scraping grooves into the wooden deck. Its blazing eyes scanned the scene, passing over the terrified pirates, before locking onto the boy on the ground. Finn, recovering first, let out a choked scream and turned to run. In a blur of black fur, the wolf was on him. It didn't bite it, simply slammed into him a force of pure kinetic energy that sent the man flying across the deck to crash into the mainmast with a sickening crunch. The other two pirates dropped their weapons and fell to their knees, babbling for mercy. The wolf ignored them. Its entire focus was on Garrick, who stood, petrified, his face a mask of disbelief and horror. The beast took another slow, deliberate step forward, the growl deepening into a death rattle. Garrick finally found his voice. Monster, he stammered, raising his belaying pin with a trembling hand. The wolf let out a deafening roar that ripped through the night, a challenge and a death sentence all in one. It gathered its powerful haunches to spring. No Elias scrambled to his feet, placing himself between the terrified pirate and the monstrous wolf. Kaelan, no. The beast froze mid-crouch, its head cocked. The molten silver eyes narrowed, a flicker of something other than pure rage showing in their depths. It looked at Elias, then at the trembling Garrick, then back to Elias. The growl in its chest subsided to a low, questioning rumble. Silas and other crew members, drawn by the commotion, had arrived on deck. They stood in stunned, silent horror, witnessing the impossible. Their captain was a werewolf. The crimson wolf of the seas was a literal wolf. The creature took a hesitant step toward Elias, its massive head lowering slightly. It let out a soft whine, a sound completely at odds with its terrifying appearance. It nudged Elias's hand gently with its wet nose, a gesture so unexpectedly tender that it took the boy's breath away. Elias, acting on pure instinct, slowly raised his hand and placed it on the wolf's broad head, his fingers sinking into the thick, coarse fur. The beast leaned into his touch, its eyes closing for a fraction of a second. The tension in its powerful body seemed to drain away, replaced by a deep, shuddering sigh. Garrick, seeing his chance, didn't hesitate. With a wild cry, he lunged not at the wolf but at Elias, swinging the heavy belaying pin. "If I can't kill the monster, I'll kill its pet." The wolf's eyes snapped open. The transformation from calm to fury was instantaneous. Before the wooden club could make contact, a black paw the size of a dinner plate swatted Garrick aside. The pirate flew through the air like a rag doll, crashing into the ship's railing with enough force to shatter it, and tumbled silently into the dark, churning sea. There was a moment of absolute silence, broken only by the lapping of waves against the hull. The great black wolf stood protectively over Elias, its chest rising and falling rapidly. It turned its head, its blazing eyes sweeping over the terrified, dumbstruck faces of the crew. There was no challenge left in them. There was only fear and awe. The secret was out. The beast was unleashed, and the entire world of the Lycan's vengeance had just been turned upside down. Dawn broke pale and grey, the silver moonlight giving way to a washed-out sun. The deck of the Lycan's vengeance was a scene of quiet devastation. The captain's cabin door was a splintered ruin. The ship's railing was shattered where Garrick had met his end. And the crew was utterly silent. They moved about their duties with the numb, wide-eyed motions of men who had seen a ghost, avoiding each other's gazes, avoiding the stern, and most of all, avoiding Elias. He was no longer just the captain's strange pet. He was the boy who had tamed the beast, the one the monster had protected. In their eyes, it made him something other, something to be feared in his own right. Elias had spent the rest of the night sitting just outside the ruined cabin. The great wolf had retreated inside after Garrick's demise, and Elias had heard the pained, guttural sounds of the transformation in reverse. He'd heard a man's cry of agony, raw and exhausted. Then silence. Silas found him there, huddled against the bulkhead, shivering from the morning chill. The old first mate handed him a water skin and a piece of hardtack. "You should eat," Silas said, his voice heavy with weariness. He looked at Elias, his expression a mixture of awe and concern. "You have a strange effect on him, lad. I've seen him through dozens of moons. I've never seen him show restraint. I've never seen him protect someone." "He's not a monster," Silas Elias said, quietly, his voice raspy. "He's a man who is afflicted." Silas grunted. "Tell that to the men, or to Garrick's ghost. They see a monster that can tear a man in two, and now they know it sleeps in the captain's bunk. They're terrified." "What will happen now?" Elias asked. "He'll have to face them," Silas said, gazing at the rising sun. "One way or another, he'll have to re-establish the order of this ship, or we'll have a mutiny on our hands born of pure fear." As if on cue, the sound of movement came from within the cabin. A moment later, Kalen Blackwood appeared in the ruined doorway. He looked like death. He was bare-chested, his torso, a road map of old scars, both from battle and from what Elias now knew were countless transformations. His face was pale and drawn, his eyes shadowed, with a bone-deep exhaustion. He leaned against the doorframe for support, his body trembling with the after-effects of the change. His gaze found Elias immediately. There was no anger, no command, only a profound, devastating vulnerability. "Elias," he rasped. Silas gave Elias a nod and discreetly moved away, beginning to bark orders to the crew trying to force a semblance of normalcy. Elias stood up and walked slowly toward his captain. He took in the wreckage of the cabin. Behind Kalen, smashed furniture, deep gouges in the floorboards, evidence of a terrible battle fought against oneself. You saw Kalen stated his voice, hollow. It was not a question. Elias nodded. "I saw." Kalen squeezed his eyes shut, a spasm of pain crossing his features. "Then you see what I am. The reason for the ruthlessness, the fear. I am a beast that wears a man's skin. I built this life, this reputation, to keep the world at bay, to give the monster a cage that breaks every full moon," Elias finished softly. Kalen opened his eyes, and they were the familiar, stormy grey, but filled with a sorrow so deep it seemed bottomless. "My father was the same. His father before him. A curse passed down through blood. When I was a boy, I lost control and I hurt people I loved. I fled, took to the sea, and swore I would never let anyone close again. Fear is a better shield than any fortress wall. If people are terrified of the man, they never get close enough to see the beast." He looked out at his crew, who were now stealing frightened glances at him. "Now they have seen it. They will desert me at the next port, or put a silver bullet in my back while I sleep." "They are afraid," Elias agreed. "But they followed you this far. They followed the Crimson Wolf. Last night they saw why you have that name." He took a tentative step closer. "I am not afraid of you, Kalen." Kalen looked at him, disbelief warring with a desperate flicker of hope in his eyes. "You should be. You saw what it did. I saw it spare the men who surrendered. I saw it protect me, Elias countered. He reached into his coat and pulled out a clean strip of linen he'd torn from his own shirt. He gestured to a series of fresh, deep scratches on Kaelin's arm, likely from the splintered doorframe. "You're bleeding." He gently took Kaelin's arm. The captain flinched but didn't pull away. His skin was cool now, no longer burning with the fever of the change. Elias carefully began to wrap the wound. It was a simple, intimate act, an act of care in the face of monstrous revelation. For Kaelin, who had lived a lifetime of violence, solitude, and self-loathing, this simple gesture of tenderness was more shocking than any blade. To be touched without fear, without revulsion, after his darkest secret was laid bare. It was an anchor in the storm of his soul. He watched Elias's careful ministrations, the way his brow was furrowed in concentration. He felt the light pressure of the boy's fingers on his skin, and the strange resonant pull he'd felt back in Oakhaven intensified, coiling deep in his gut. It was a feeling of rightness, of recognition. The ancient instinctual part of him, the wolf, knew what it was. This human, this brave, compassionate boy was something more. He was a balm to the beast's rage, a center to his chaotic world. Mate. The word echoed in the depths of his mind, a primal certainty that shook him more than the transformation itself. When Elias finished tying the knot, he looked up and found Kaelin staring at him with an intensity that made his breath catch. "Why, Kaelin?" whispered his voice, thick with emotion. "Why are you not running screaming from this ship because I don't think the man and the beast are as separate as you believe?" Elias said, his green eyes honest and clear. "I think the beast is a part of you, a wild, pained part, and I'm not afraid of the pain." Kaelin raised a hand, his fingers trembling slightly, and gently brushed a stray lock of auburn hair from Elias's forehead. The contact sent a jolt through both of them. The crew was watching. They saw their monstrous captain, the beast of the full moon, standing wounded and vulnerable. And they saw the human boy for whom the captain had spared a town tending to him, without a trace of fear. It didn't make sense. It defied the laws of nature as they knew them. It was a new kind of power dynamic, one not built on fear, but on a strange, unspoken loyalty. The crew was shaken, not by the revelation of the monster, but by the boy who was not afraid of it. Their fear of their captain began to slowly, imperceptibly transmute into a new, complex form of awe. The man who could command such a beast, and the boy who could soothe it together. They were a force unlike any they had ever known. The order of the ship was not broken. It was being reforged in the light of a new day. The weeks that followed the revelation were a period of strange, tense peace. The crew gave Kaelin a wide berth, their respect now tinged with a deep, superstitious fear. But it was a fear that solidified his command rather than threatening it. No one would dare cross a captain who was a literal force of nature. Elias's status changed as well. He became an untouchable figure, the captain's confidant, the beast soother. He was treated with a cautious reverence that was almost as isolating as the previous hostility. The bond between Elias and Kaelin deepened in the crucible of their shared secret. Kaelin began to teach Elias navigation, how to read the stars and the moods of the sea. He found the boy to be a remarkably quick study, with a mind as sharp as any sextant. In return, Elias's calm presence seemed to soothe the ever-present rage simmering beneath Kaelin's surface. The nightmares that plagued the captain became less frequent, his moods less volatile. He was still the formidable Kaelin Blackwood, but the edges of his ruthless persona were softened by a warmth only Elias was allowed to see. One afternoon, as they charted a course through a treacherous archipelago, Kaelin spoke of the past he had so long kept buried. The Silver Order, he said, his voice low, as he traced a line on the map. That's what they call themselves. Werewolf hunters. Fanatics who believe we are abominations to be purged from the world. Elias looked up from his calculations. Is that who you were running from? Kaelin nodded grimly. They found my family when I was 15. They carry silver weapons, blessed blades, consecrated bullets. They move with military precision. They slaughtered my father, my uncles. My mother hid me and told me to run and never look back. I've been running ever since. He clenched his fist. The sea was the only place vast enough to hide. A shadow of understanding fell over Elias. Kaelin's ruthlessness wasn't just a persona. It was a survival mechanism honed by years of being hunted. Their fragile peace was shattered 2 days later. The lookout's cry of "Sail ho!" was not unusual, but the description that followed sent a chill through Kaelin. A sleek frigate flying no colors, black hull, silver trim. She's fast, Captain, and gaining on us, Kaelin grabbed his spyglass, his face hardening into a mask of cold fury. He focused on the pursuing ship. It was just as the lookout described. But he saw something more. Mounted on its forecastle was a weapon he recognized with dread, a ballista, but its bolts were fletched with white goose feathers and tipped with gleaming, unmistakable silver. On its flagstaff, a white banner was finally unfurled, bearing the sigil of a snarling wolf's head, pierced by a silver sword, the Argent Hand, the flagship of the Silver Order. They found me. Kaelin whispered the words like a death sentence. All hands on deck, Silas bellowed, the years of experience kicking in. Man the cannons, prepare for battle. The crew scrambled, the tense calm replaced by the frantic, controlled chaos of preparing for a fight. But this was different. Their enemy wasn't a merchant vessel or a naval patrol. It was an order of dedicated killers who hunted their captain's very nature. How Elias asked, his heart pounding. How did they find you? Someone must have talked, Kaelin. Snarled his eyes, scanning his crew with a flicker of his old paranoia. A deserter from a port, a captured sailor from a prize ship. It doesn't matter. They're here. The Argent Hand was unnaturally fast. It closed the distance with terrifying speed, not bothering with warning shots. The first volley was not from cannons, but from long-range rifles, fired by men in polished steel cuirasses lining the rails. The distinctive ping of bullets impacting the hull was followed by the screams of pirates who were hit. The wounded men didn't just bleed. The area around their wounds sizzled and smoked, the silver poisoning their flesh. They mean to kill us all to get to me, Kaelin growled. He turned to Elias, his eyes blazing with a fierce protective fire. Elias, you must go below. Hide in the hold. No matter what you hear, you do not come out. I'm not leaving you, Elias protested. That is an order. Kaelin roared, his voice laced with the beast's authority. I brought you into this world. I will not be the reason you leave it. He grabbed Elias by the shoulders, his grip like iron. Survive. Please. Before Elias could argue further, a heavy grappling hook slammed into the railing nearby, followed by another and another. The hunters were preparing to board. Kaelin shoved Elias toward the hatch. Silas, get him below. Silas grabbed Elias's arm, his face grim. He's right, lad. This ain't your fight. Go reluctantly. Elias allowed himself to be led below his last sight, being Kaelin drawing his twin cutlasses, his face a mask of grim determination, as the first of the silver-armored hunters swarmed over the rails. The sounds of the battle were terrifying. The roar of cannons and pistols was punctuated by the clang of steel on steel, the screams of the wounded, and the zealous war cries of the Silver Order. But underneath it all, Elias soon heard another sound, a deep, furious snarling that grew into a full-throated roar of a great beast. Kaelin had unleashed the wolf, not because of the moon, but by choice. It was a desperate, dangerous gambit. The transformation without the moon's trigger was agonizing and draining, but he would not let these men take his ship, his crew, his Elias. Huddled in the darkness of the hold, Elias felt a sense of utter helplessness. Kaelin was up there, fighting a battle for his life against the very people who had destroyed his family. He had to do something. His mind raced, recalling the charts he'd been studying with Kaelin. They were in the Serpent's Teeth Archipelago, a notoriously dangerous string of islands and reefs that most sailors avoided. But Elias had memorized every reef, every treacherous current. An idea reckless and desperate formed in his mind. He couldn't fight with a sword, but perhaps he could fight with the ship itself. He found a small axe used for breaking open crates and ignoring the sounds of the raging battle above. He made his way not to the deck, but further down into the very guts of the ship, the tiller room, which housed the mechanisms that controlled the rudder. If he could get control of the ship's direction, he might just give Kaelin the chance he needed. His heart pounded with a fear greater than any he had felt before, but his resolve was absolute. Kaelin had ordered him to survive, but Elias knew that surviving without Kaelin wasn't survival at all. The deck of the Lycan's vengeance was a vortex of silver and blood. Kaelin, in his massive wolf form, fought with savage fury, but the disciplined hunters of the Silver Order were winning. Their silver-edged blades kept the pirates at bay, and their leader, the cold-eyed prefect Valerius, directed their formations with lethal precision. For every hunter Kaelin tore down, another two took his place, their pikes jabbing at him, keeping him on the defensive. Just as the pirates' line began to break, the ship lurched violently, not from a wave, but from a sharp, deliberate turn. It veered directly toward the jagged rocks of the nearby island. Below decks, Elias had seized control of the rudder, using his memorized knowledge of the treacherous channel to turn the ship itself into a weapon. The sudden, impossible maneuver threw the hunters into chaos. "They're trying to scuttle us," Valerius shouted in alarm. It was the opening Kaelin needed. He let out a deafening roar and charged, ignoring the jabbing pikes to aim directly for the leader. Valerius raised a silver-inlaid rifle and fired. The bullet slammed into Kaelin's shoulder, and the wolf cried out in agony as the silver burned through its flesh. But he did not fall. Fueled by a desperate will, he crashed into the prefect, his jaws closing on the man's sword arm with a sickening crunch. At that same moment, the hunters' ship, the Argent Hand, unable to match the sudden turn, smashed headlong into a hidden reef. With the sound of splintering timber and the sight of their vessel sinking, the remaining hunters lost all heart and surrendered. As the battle ended, the wolf's form receded, leaving Kaelin human, bleeding and unconscious on the deck. Elias rushed to his side, his face pale with terror. Under Silas's grim direction, they dug the silver bullet from the captain's flesh, Elias's hand a constant steadying presence on Kaelin's brow. Later in the quiet of the cabin, Kaelin awoke. Elias was by his side, cleaning the wound. Kaelin reached out with his good hand and captured Elias's. "You saved us," Kaelin said, his voice a hoarse whisper. His storm-grey eyes, cleared of battle fury, were filled with a raw, undeniable emotion. "In my world there is a bond older than words, a connection the soul recognizes. A mate." Elias's breath caught. "The wolf knew it the moment it saw you in the rain," Kaelin confessed, but the man was too afraid to admit it. "I am not afraid anymore. Elias Vance, you are my calm in the storm, my anchor, my mate." Elias felt the absolute truth of the word settle into his own soul. All the fear and hardship had led him here to this man who was both pirate and predator. Leaning down, he closed the distance between them, a kiss of profound acceptance and unwavering belonging. "I am a monster and a hunted man," Kalen murmured against his lips. "This life will not be easy." "Then it's a good thing I have a spine," Elias whispered back, a promise and a memory all in one. The Crimson Wolf had found his heart, and together they were ready to face any tide. And so the ruthless pirate, Kalen Blackwood, found that true strength wasn't in the fear he commanded, but in the love he dared to accept. Elias Vance, the boy whose bravery stunned a crew of cutthroats, did more than save his town. He saved a man from the monster within. Their journey was one of fire, sea, and moonlight, proving that sometimes the most fearsome beasts have the most human hearts, and the greatest treasures are not chests of gold, but the unwavering courage of a soulmate. They sailed on not just as captain and navigator, but as two halves of a wild and wonderful whole, their legend whispered on every tide. If you were captivated by the story of the Crimson Wolf and his human heart, please let us know in the comments below. What was your favorite moment? Don't forget to hit that like button if you enjoyed their journey, and share this video with a friend who loves a story of romance, danger, and redemption. Most importantly, subscribe to our channel and ring the bell so you won't miss our next epic tale. Thanks for listening.